Hi everyone, and welcome to this event by Climate Group entitled Energy Efficiency, If Not Now, When? We're really happy you could join us today. And we organised this event to coincide with World Energy Efficiency Day, which has just happened. And we really want to maintain momentum on this critical topic of energy efficiency. I'm Toby Morgan. I lead the work at Climate Group on energy efficiency and the built environment, and really happy to talk to you today. And we've got a really excellent bunch of speakers lined up, and we wanted to do this event to really raise awareness. We know with the global energy crisis sparked by the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia, it's really shone a light on the critical nature of energy efficiency. Not only is it essential to wean ourselves off fossil fuels and to accelerate the clean energy transition, it's also critical to enhance energy security, tackle energy poverty. And also it's great for business because it can increase business resilience and improve operational efficiency as well. At EP100, we're really determined to push for further action on energy efficiency, and we want to work with our members to celebrate those success stories, promote best practice, and break down some of the remaining barriers to action. Okay, so we're going to launch a quick poll here to warm everyone up, as I know it's cold outside in the UK at the moment. It's snowing actually for a change. So we want to warm everyone up with a quick poll. So whilst you fill in the question there, I'll run you through the agenda. So after my introductions, we're going to hear from Gabriela Prata Dias from the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Centre, who will give us our keynote speech. We'll then hear from my colleague Hannah from the EP100 team on progress update on EP100 and some of the key things we're working on for the coming year. We'll then go into the panel session. So Gabriela will join the panel. We'll also hear from a couple of our EP100 members from SOM and from Danfoss. And then I'll moderate that session. And then we'll also take some audience Q&A. So if you see, once the poll has disappeared, you'll be able to access the Q&A button at the bottom of Zoom. So if you keep on sending your questions in throughout the event, we'll try and get through as many of those in the Q&A session. So the panel session, we have around half an hour. And then with the Q&A, we've got about 15 minutes. So we've got a good amount of time to really dig deep into some of these key topics. And we want to get as much interaction from the audience as possible. And then Emily from the team will also take us through the latest EP100 report, which we just launched last week. So we're really happy to share some of those findings and some of the big issues that have been happening in the last year of EP100, and also some of the examples and case studies from some of our members as well. And then we'll also wrap up with a quick poll at the end to get some feedback, and then we'll close at 1:15. So yeah. Thanks for that. So we'll give everyone a couple more minutes to, a couple more seconds to do the poll. Okay. Okay, so we asked, has the current energy crisis raised the profile of energy efficiency within your organization? Hopefully you can all see the results on screen. So we've got, vast majority agree or strongly agree. So I think that's what we found talking to our members, talking to other stakeholders. Now has never been a better time to raise the profile of this work. And, that's why we called this event, If Not Now, When as well. So we really need to keep on pushing for this. We know that energy efficiency is key to hit our climate change goals, and it's great for business as well, and can help wean ourselves off fossil fuels. So it really is win-win. So thank you for all submitting your answers there. Okay, great. So now I'm going to introduce Gabriela from UNEP Copenhagen Climate Centre for our keynote address. So over to you, Gabriela.
Hi, thanks a lot, Toby. It's my pleasure to be here today, also on International Women's Day, and I'm very pleased to do this opening remarks from my side. And also elaborate a bit on the critical role of energy efficiency in this net zero pathway towards full transformational towards sustainability and energy efficiency. So just as a starter, I would like to to recall that over the last decade, we have seen very strong integration of energy and climate policies, and this has definitely started to change the narrative and the situation and the opportunities around climate change mitigation, and it has helped been helped also with strong innovation as well happening on the technology side and implementation. And this, far as just examples, electrification of uses is one of the main drivers of this, especially when we look at the transport sector with the electrification of vehicles, and also on the heating and cooling in our homes, in our buildings, and in industry. So all of this to say that most of the solutions that we need are now viable and bankable, no matter what, around the world. But still, as we know, there are some challenges in mitigating emissions. We have, for the ones that noticed, IEA just published last week another report around the emissions produced during the year 2022. And there's the unfortunate news around that emissions actually have grown 0.9% over the last year, after a bit of oscillations happening because of COVID-19. And this growth is in emissions, although it doesn't seem very big, it actually is quite bad news, because if we want to keep on track to the 1.5 degree scenario that we need to comply with the Paris Agreement, we would be needing to decrease emissions in about 45%. So actually this emissions growth of 0.9% is quite bad news. Anyway, what sustains this growth is another bad news, which is 20% of the responsibilities of this is because of heating and cooling needs and supplying these needs. And on the top of that, we can add the electricity generation and a few other areas. So all in all, we are 7 years away for 2030, and we need to do a big effort to this decrease of emissions. Now, on the better news, we can say that the expansion of renewable energies has helped and to soften a bit this trend of raising emissions. Also, if we go into detail of this analysis, industry emissions have declined over the last year, about 1.7%, which is mostly because of probably of China having had some lockdowns. But for the energy efficiency business, we should look out, because buildings saw actually the biggest increase in emissions driven by extreme weather conditions that we have been seeing over last year around the world. So we have had episodes of extreme heat and extreme cold happening here and there, as we are all aware. So again, there are still challenges ahead of us in mitigating emissions, but developing national and net zero strategies is definitely something where we should keep on working on, and working on as well on reporting mechanisms. And here I would like to say that energy efficiency should be the basis and the actual starting point for these strategies. And because the reason why is because if we implement the appropriate energy efficiency policies and have them in place and enforced, we could actually achieve 40% of the emissions reductions needed to comply with the Paris Agreement. So this is a very strong case for energy efficiency. It's around 40% that energy efficiency could help with in order to comply with Paris. As we have seen on the poll, and as Toby has mentioned before, in the context of now the energy crisis, we had finally people realizing that the amount of wasted energy that we throw out because of just lack of consideration and many other factors. And definitely something that people are now taking a bit more conscious, and probably one of the reasons why is because of prices. Energy prices got really much higher, and was a major driver in order to consider energy efficiency as an ally to tackle this issue. Anyway, energy prices favor, of course, as a market instrument to energy efficiency, but we also know the flip side of it, and the consequences it may have on some industrial and corporate activities, and the impact it has on the production as a production factor in these activities. And we have also seen that there are impacts around closing factories and lost jobs. So we actually need a balance here. Energy should have a cost reflective price, but we also need to find the right way to address the energy uses, so that energy efficiency could also help in this way, this angle. But we are not only talking about energy costs and prices. Energy efficiency has multiple benefits. It also helps on energy security, because we know that the energy we do not use is the safest one, and so we don't need it, actually. It also creates jobs, because when we are retrofitting a building, for example, so changing windows, changing in making interventions into insulation, or more heating and cooling, more efficient heating and cooling, it also introduces jobs and activity in the economy. It also improves health, for example, on energy poverty related topics, energy efficiency is quite relevant, and many of the public programs should also look out for that. And again, energy efficiency saves money. But I know that the audience of this event is mostly corporate, so probably you realize faster than anybody else that the cheapest kilowatt hour is the one that is not used. And so you're probably much more aware of the opportunities around that topic. However, in my daily work, as in the context of UNEP, I deal mostly with the public sector, and I'm very often faced with situations on governments at local or national level wanting to invest in added generation capacity for energy supply for their communities. And very often these same governments do not have in place any kind of, or very weak energy efficiency standards, regulations, so that we are sure that the energy is used locally, or in this particular country is actually being used in the most efficient way. So this starts to become not only a rational type of problem or problematic, but also probably an ethical issue. So what we try to advise is that there are basic features that should be in place. The first one I've been mentioning is around energy policy and energy efficiency regulation. So this is the basis of all well-functioning energy efficient markets. Have in place energy cost reflective prices, and this actually probably means the total phase out of fossil fuel subsidies. And I would like to also mention a number here that also last year in 2022 we have seen fossil fuel subsidies in the order of $1 trillion US. And if we invest this in energy efficiency, you probably can imagine the amount of work we could do with that amount of money. A third factor is that energy efficiency is normally somehow technical and complex, and it needs skills and capacity in order to implement and develop these type of projects. So actually, there is a need to act on skills and capacity and train people that are really ready to implement all this transformation. And last but not least, finance. I would like also to mention this as one of the critical pillars of energy efficiency deployment. Finance, in our view, needs a structural reform, and because of exactly that, energy efficiency projects are typically small, dispersed, complex, sometimes cumbersome to implement, and very often difficult to understand by the finance officer on duty in a particular finance institution. So some type of transformation is also needed by the eyes of the finance sector. Very often we hear that there's a lot of money, but there are no interesting projects. And from the energy efficiency experts, we hear we have many interesting projects, but there is no finance available. So we should actually stop this lack of dialogue in this space and take no and do not take no as an answer to a finance opportunity for energy efficiency. And here probably we could take a not this way and work with the finance community in order to make projects interesting and viable from the eyes of the perspective of the finance sector. And policy is perhaps one of the tools that we have at hand, creating the conditions for this finance to happen. But this needs actually to move fast, and we are running out of time. Technology, fortunately, is doing a lot of the job, but policy and regulation needs to accompany that speed, so that we have the transparency and the credibility in the market for that to happen. Also, on the positive side, we see that public conscience is getting there. People are more aware of sustainability issues and actually demand that from suppliers. And this, of course, then translates further into peer kind of competition between technology and service suppliers, so that these services and products are more and more sustainable. So actually the community conscience of this issue is also helping to drive this forward. But anyway, what I would also like to raise is that from the good news perspective is that what we need is to comply with a 1.5 degree scenario is already there. We already have the technologies, the tools and the policies, but we need to implement all that. And there are just as many low-hanging fruits as we can think of. Just to give a few examples around, for example, heat pumps available in the market, electric vehicles, storage of electricity, and many others, windows and insulation and energy design of buildings, etc. So we know what needs to be done, we know how to do it, and we actually need to start, instead of just making small incremental steps, just be bold and transformational and actually move fast. And energy efficiency, as we know, is the fastest and the most cost-effective way to do this energy transition, to cut bills and reduce emissions. So as we started and also valuing the work of EP100 and climate group, so many corporates are now moving towards net zero ambitions, but as it was often seen is that there is a lack of strategy, and this strategy should start with energy efficiency as kind of the first activity to deliver on. So it's great to see initiatives like EP100 and the leadership it's been giving. There are now around 125 companies that joined the effort in about the same number of countries. And I just picked on the the annual report, sorry, and it's nice to see that the EP100 members reduced the annual emissions equivalent to the sum of the emissions of Denmark, where I'm sitting, plus Italy and Portugal, where actually I'm coming from. So we have all the ingredients. If we do not act now, when should we do it? Thanks a lot, and over to you, Toby.
Thank you, Gabriela. Really interesting stuff. And yeah, a few things that I picked up on. Yeah, the really key element of energy efficiency for corporates as well is that the multiple benefits. So we don't want companies just to think about a simple return on investment type calculation. We want to think about the whole business. You know, you're optimizing all your operations, your buildings, your facilities, your warehouses, whatever it is, which is good for the staff, it's good for productivity. So yeah, that's how we try and frame to businesses the importance of energy efficiency, as well as all the sustainability benefits as well. And yeah, I think the skills element you mentioned is really key as well. You know, there's still lots of, for example, just picking up on heat pumps, there's still lots of misinformation out there on heat pumps, especially with kind of existing gas boiler installers and things like that, saying they don't work in the cold, even though we know that, you know, they're forming part of the major type of heating in Scandinavia now, and they don't work in older houses and things like that. So there's lots of disinformation. So as well as the policy and the finance, we need to, you know, upskill everyone on these topics as well. And yeah, the finance piece is really key as well. And we're looking to expand our work at Climate Group, doing some bits on financing for building renovations and things like that. So watch this space on that. But yeah, really appreciate your input and your thoughts there, Gabriela. And we'll speak to you in a bit in the panel session, and we can dig down into some of those topics in a bit more detail. Great. So now I'm going to pass over to my colleague Hannah from the EP100 team, who will take us through some of the corporate climate strategies and the importance of energy efficiency in that. So over to you, Hannah.
Thanks, Toby. Hi, so I'm Hannah. I'm the EP100 campaign manager here at the Climate Group. We thought it'd be a good idea to give some insight into how we see our work going forward into the rest of the year and its relevance in corporate climate strategy. So with the looming threat of rising temperatures alongside global issues of energy insecurity and ineffective energy infrastructure, it can be really difficult, as we all know, for businesses to prioritise matters that are not directly impacting or benefiting the bottom line. So as energy demand is continuously increasing and enormous volumes are continuously just wasted through product and system inefficiency, it leaves current rates of energy efficiency, as Gabriela said, way below where they need to be. So with the IEA stating that there's current improvement rates of energy intensity of around 1.9%, and it needs to be at around 4% to hit net zero climate goals globally. Now, whilst energy efficiency may be less glamorous than other elements of the sustainability journey, as Gabriela also said, and also no doubt as Rasmus will say later, the greenest energy is the energy that we don't actually use. So whilst the sustainability transition needs to be recognised as this holistic process where all systems and efforts need to come together to tackle the issue at hand, energy efficiency itself has the potential to deliver 40% of the emission reductions needed to reach global climate goals. And it also just so happens to be a way for businesses to improve their bottom line. So when optimizing any kind of process in business, knowledge is power, right? So having energy management systems that accurately measure energy consumption gives corporates the power to reduce overhead energy costs while seeing savings in real time. So research has even found that businesses who prioritize energy efficiency are more productive overall because their workers are happy. And you know, moving forward, this means that companies are putting workers first and are able to make informed choices when it comes to energy investment and future energy decisions. It's also worth noting that as governmental and regulatory organisations have started putting regulation in place to globally support net zero goals, it makes sense from a business and brand profile standpoint to be ahead of that curve and ahead of that trend. So therefore, we as the EP100 campaign exists because energy efficiency is an accessible and empowering way to make a positive change. We work to raise the profile of leading companies that are making the vital changes that need to happen to become more efficient. And we're bringing these companies together and going above and beyond local legislation to share their expertise and create enabling environments for further improvement. The way we go about doing this is firstly through commitment. So each organisation is making a public commitment where they report to us on an annual basis as part of our report. So we're doing this because it means that we're providing credibility, validation, and transparency. Secondly, these members, we're bringing them together, sometimes on a global scale, so through keynote events like Climate Week NYC, or sometimes through peer-to-peer forums to connect people and understand what's needed for energy efficiency progress on a regional scale, or perhaps on an industry scale. The result of uniting this ambition is a corporate demand signal, which is very jargony, sorry, but is a way of unlocking policy and regulatory change. And it's a really great way of inspiring other businesses to follow suit of the climate leaders that are part of our campaign. So we also, from the findings above our report, we can see that it works, even just from this map. So it's visible to see just how global the EP campaign has become recently, with 125 members now operating in 126 markets. We're building this critical mass that's required to drive real-time change. And as our newest report reveals, we're having a pretty strong impact. That's kind of all from me, but if anyone is interested in learning a bit more about EP100 or partnership opportunities and our priorities this year, then please feel free to get in touch. Thanks, back to you.
Great, thank you, Hannah. Yeah, really interesting stuff, and we'd like to continue to work with all of our members and hopefully some potential new members as well to really drive the campaign into next year, and Hannah will be a big part of that, leading on our work on recruitment engagement and all of our events, activities, all that type of thing. So I'm sure you'll be hearing from Hannah in the future. If I could just remind you to send in any questions on the Q&A box at the end of, the bottom of Zoom, you'll see it there. So please do send in any questions. But without further ado, we'll get cracking with the panel discussion. So we're going to welcome back all of our speakers now. So if you could just put your cameras on, please, speakers. So Gabriela is rejoining us. We've also got Yasmin Kaluglu from SOM and Rasmus Christensen from Danfoss. So I'm going to go straight into the questions, and perhaps Rasmus and Yasmin, you can introduce yourself quickly at the start of your the first question. So I'll go to Yasmin first. So the first one we want to know is what's the significance of energy efficiency for SOM's overall climate strategy or decarbonisation strategy? And how do you think the profile of energy efficiency can be raised both internally for your organisation, but also sort of globally as well? So I'll let you start on that one, Yasmin.
Right. Thank you for that. It's a pleasure to be here on Women's Day, as Gabriela mentioned as well. So I'm Yasmin Kaloglu. I'm one of the design principals at SOM, and we are a architecture, design, and engineering firm globally. And I lead, in addition to my role as a design lead, I also lead our climate action group globally at SOM. So we take a lot of actions. And also I chair a couple of the professional organizations that deal with climate matters, let's say, in the state side. So I think today's conversation is a very important topic because it's quite current, as we saw in the poll with the energy crisis, etc. But also, I think many companies like ourselves also are moving to a position where, for example, we see ourselves as citizen architects. So more than just us as a company, we see ourselves as a socially responsible, future forward thinking firm. And as a result, similar to probably my peers here, we have pretty ambitious commitments to where we want to be in the near future. And as part of that, we became actually a net zero business with offsets this year. But as part of that strategy, it included a radical reduction of energy, as well as materials and waste as well. So we tried to create a holistic strategy here. But also within that equation, there are certain things that we can control. And given we are a service provider and not a product manufacturer, for example, our biggest assets for energy efficiency is actually our offices. So we have a pretty robust system on how to do that there. But leaving that aside for a second, we are also able to influence the building industry, which is the industry that we provide services for. And 40% of our global emissions still come from the building industry, from the materials we produce for it, and from the operation of buildings, the energy use of buildings. So that's a key target for us. And our goal is to get to net zero energy in 2030 for all of our projects and design at that point. And that remains to be a challenge for all of us. And I think I can speak for my industry, that remains to be a challenge. And I think part of the solution is the energy source, the energy profile has to clean significantly. So we continue to have the tough conversations about creating energy efficiencies. However, also from the other end, the grid has to clean up significantly as well. And I say that because when you look at the make of that 40% emissions, building industry's emissions I mentioned, a big chunk of it actually comes from not operational. It comes from actually embodied carbon, which means that it is not just the energy that we use in our buildings, it is the materials, it's the construction of it, and it's the deconstruction of it too. And that's not something that we are able to control because, you know, we try to use, of course, manufacturers for materials that are more green than others, but literally a greening of the grid and the change of the manufacturing industry is going to make a significant difference in our, I guess, goal towards 2030, 2040. And I know that many of us have different goals here. So I would like to emphasize that it is simply, we are all in one and we're all tied together. And while certain industries will have bigger impact, we are all influencing each other, and our impact has to be measured collectively. So I would like to maybe bring the emphasis on the, particularly on the grid, and the cleaning of the energy profile is going to make a significant difference in our world.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jasmine. And just to that point on, how have you managed to raise the profile of kind of energy efficiency within the organization? Does having these types of targets or being members of EP100, does that help the sort of internal process, the internal buy-in with the C-suite level people?
Actually, our decision came before signing up to EP100, so we had already agreed this internally. So it was an easy decision for us. But I think having clear goals and having more commitments help definitely, because it is no longer voluntary, right? We committed to something and we're going to make it happen. And I think those type of activities and commitments make a big difference in all industries similar to ours too.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's something we find on with all of our kind of built environment type members, the whole life cycle of the building, that's becoming more and more prominent. Not just operational carbon now, which used to be, you know, seen as the golden ticket, as it were, to decarbonizing buildings. We need to look at the whole life cycle carbon. And then we're also working in partnership with World Green Building Council on, you know, on the net zero carbon building commitment. So it's something that it used to be the elephant in the room, the embodied carbon element that no one wanted to talk about, but now it's firmly on the agenda, and we know we need to tackle that. Great, thanks for that, Jasmine. Really interesting insights there. I'm going to go over to Rasmus then. So, Rasmus, could you just introduce yourself briefly, and then have a go on that question? I can repeat it if you need as well.
Well, thanks, Toby. My name is Rasmus Appelgaard Christensen. I'm the Vice President for Group Public Affairs in Danfoss. For those of you who do not know Danfoss, we are a multinational company headquartered in Denmark within advanced manufacturing, but specializing really in energy efficiency and electrification applications, and thereby also both enabling and driving the green transition. The two questions, the first one, what role does energy efficiency play in our own decarbonization? The answer to that is an incredibly important role, perhaps at least internally less surprising, because we do a lot of the energy efficiency technologies, so they are known by us, and of course it would both not be, we need to be serious and take our own medicine. That is one part of it, but also, of course, we know how they work and can apply them internally. So if we look at our own decarbonization strategy within Danfoss, especially scope 1, there are really sort of three legs to that. The first being energy efficiency. So we are trying to install and apply technologies throughout our industrial manufacturing processes, and in fact throughout the whole company, to save energy. Simply reduce the amount of energy we use. The second one, and I'll come back to that, has more to do with making sure that we also make effective use of the energy that has already been produced. So that relates to excess energy. So that is, or excess heat. That is really the second leg in our decarbonization journey. And then it's only for the residual, the things that we cannot use energy efficiency to lower, or the excess heat we have available. So it's only the remaining marginal where we will simply green it. So make sure that we use renewable energy in our electricity consumption, etc. So those are the sort of the three legs. Of course, if you one thing is doing that internally. Externally, both as part of our ESG journey, I mean, we can help our suppliers decarbonize as well. And of course, we are someone else, scope 2 and 3. And of course, the fact that we use energy efficiency and decarbonize is an advantage to them. And that also, of course, just supports our general sort of value proposition on energy efficiency. As regards the second question, how do we raise the profile? Again, internally, less of a problem, because this is part of the DNA of who we are as a company. Externally, of course, it's actually a much bigger challenge, I must say. I think, I mean, it's very pertinent that we have events like the conversation we have today. But the truth is still that, at least in my view, energy efficiency is still a little bit sort of the add-on to the debate. We talk a lot about upscaling renewables, more general transition challenges, and then people tend to say, oh yeah, by the way, we also need to remember energy efficiency, and it can deliver something, which is, and that's good, but we need to, really get it up higher on the agenda. And I think maybe part of the problem, despite the fact that buildings are tremendously important, both in our energy system, I mean, we really need to lower the energy consumption in buildings. But a little bit of the problem is also that a lot of people and politicians tend to equate sort of energy efficiency with something that goes on in buildings. And I think it's important to make it clear that energy efficiency is also relevant in many, many other contexts. Industry, of course, the obvious case in point, but also in other parts of society. The more we can focus also on these other sectoral areas, transport. I think the more we can get energy efficiency into the center stage of the green transition, and talk about what role does it really play in both today's and in the future's energy system.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rasmus. Yeah, agree with the energy efficiency being important, not just for built environment. Obviously, it's very important there, but yeah, a lot of our EP100 members are actually these heavy industry type companies. So cement manufacturers, construction companies, heavy industry users that are using a lot of energy in the first place, and they really see the importance of energy efficiency. So thanks for that. Gabriela, I'm going to go over to you now and just change the question slightly, because it's not quite relevant for your organization, but we've spoken in the past. It's really important to have these public-private agreements or relations to really increase the uptake of energy efficiency. So I'm wondering if you could provide some insights from your point of view on how we increase that public-private working together.
Yeah, thanks, Toby. And it was really interesting to hear both my peers in this panel, and also previously Hannah mentioning, because actually energy efficiency is definitely the piece of this puzzle that has the least glamour. It's the least glamorous. It's difficult to understand. It's hard to see. It's complex. So it's really an effort to make this look a bit more interesting and glamorous, as you say. But I mean, the whole the whole story doesn't happen without the private sector, full stop. So the public sector can have a lot of programs and motivate and policies in place that it needs to do, but this effort only with the public sector doesn't lead us to the end bottom line that we are aiming at. So we definitely need to involve the private sector. But for this, yes, of course, we need to create the conditions so that the private sector is also comfortable in operating in this space. And here, of course, policies are very, very important. I'm just thinking about some regulations around buildings in Germany banning or indirectly banning the use of gas and oil heating appliances, or in France being able to rent an apartment which is lower than a certain energy efficiency rating. So this type of policies actually put some pressure on the market and give the opportunities for the market to react and the private sector to be present and be operating as well. And also I would like to insist again on the prices on the fossil fuel subsidies removal, because it's actually countering the energy efficient as a countering energy efficiency incentive, and in the end of the day probably it solves a short-term problem, but not really as a sustainable solution towards the future. And if it's not really properly implemented, it can end up being beneficial just to the wealthier and not really to all the consumers at large. So I mean, I could also I couldn't agree more with the idea mentioned by Yasmin on this value chain, addressing the whole value chain of the industries, of the different industries. So we have to be careful in this case of buildings, not only to look at them when they are operating, but also the embodied carbon they involve, and basically try to implement the solutions that are mostly efficient, looking at super efficient appliances that are out there, and make use of other resources like digitalization and the electrification of uses.
Yeah.
So yeah, over. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriela. And speakers, feel free to chip in on the other speakers' points as well. So if you've got any interesting points, just feel free to raise those as well. Yasmin, I was going to come back to you just on the kind of policy side of things. Obviously, as a built environment type company, do you think, what is the major barrier to sort of decarbonising the built environment? Is it financial? Is it policy barrier, or a bit of both? What do you think is the big holdback here?
I feel like it's everything at the moment. Well, everything's a challenge and everything's an opportunity, right? So, and you know, I think we all know that the answer to this question is, I wish there was a silver bullet that one of us could say, I got it, but we don't. So, and I think Gabriela mentioned that it's kind of, I call it the push and pull. So policies are working hard to push in a way, and it's harder in some places than other for sure. So those places that are not pushing hard, I think we need to get there. But at the same time, the industry has to pull as well. And I think we are seeing some glimpses, some successful glimpses of it. And I think there's a big global difference here. You know, when we look at kind of the, I guess, Asia and South Asia and Europe and Americas, we are seeing different pictures here. So I don't think we're consistent globally. But what could help dramatically here in the policy side, I think I call it the push and pull, but I also call it the sticks and carrots. So sticks being the penalties and the policy mandatory obligations we would have, which is really impactful because it sets the baseline, right? Nobody should do below this, don't do below this. And we have to keep on raising that bar. But at the same time, carrots make a huge difference. So when I say carrots, I mean the incentives. And incentives come in many forms. It can come in the form of recognition of a brand. It also comes in a financial incentive. It also comes in a tax incentive. So there are many tools that I guess governments have to implement this, and also professional bodies, organizations have to implement these. And I think we need to, I think one of us said earlier that we need to do bold and we need to be bold and transformational. And I do not see many of those, which means that, you know, yes, we incentivize incremental changes, we incentivize incremental moves, but how do we incentivize the big move? Can we create something even bigger that says, look, yes, you can go do this and get this much. However, if you go to, I don't know, net zero today, I'm making it up, right? 100%, I don't know, energy generation on site, net zero energy, you get to that. And that doesn't exist in many places that we work in, at least. And I think those are the kind of things that policies that or incentives we can create, that we're not just trying to do the base, increase the base, we're also incentivizing to jump beyond. And those set important precedents for the whole industries. Those examples we achieve create a whole pool of precedents we can look at to test the feasibility and the strategies of these that start becoming more common as we go along.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that carrot and stick approach is super important, and like you're saying, we really need more of those sort of energy performance standards for buildings, minimum energy performance standards, MEPS. So there's currently the Energy Performance in Buildings Directive going through the EU Parliament. So hopefully that will come out with some, you know, stronger standards for our buildings, but we really need to ramp that up. And yeah, like you're saying, having these exemplar projects and just seeing what is possible with buildings. And I guess I don't want to put words in your mouth, but from SOM's point of view as well, it's getting yourself out there as a leader, saying this is what we're doing and getting ahead of the competition, ahead of the market. So there's a bit of both required.
Yeah, and we are actively doing that too. And I think I mentioned earlier that we had made an internal commitment before we did an external commitment, which means now that we're just doing this. Basically, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the client is asking us, in a way. And of course, every client is different, for example, and they have their own goals. But at the same time, we're saying that we're gonna measure the energy efficiency of 100% of our buildings, and we are doing that today. So that is, you know, that's just become common practice for us. So yeah.
Great, thanks, Jasmine. And Rasmus, I'll go back to you. Just in terms of Danfoss, obviously you're an energy efficiency leader, and it's kind of in your DNA almost as a company. But what are the sort of internal mechanisms you use, such as internal KPIs, to really continue to sort of push this forward?
Thanks, Toby. Be very happy to answer that, but with your permission, maybe just react a little bit to the discussion we just had, if that's okay.
Yeah,
I think I very much agree with Jasmine on the sticks and carrots. If we really are to move the needle, especially on energy efficiency, if you look at what happened, at least throughout most of Europe during the last autumn, with very, very high energy prices, to me that was really a missed opportunity, in the sense that here we could have, with the funding that was suddenly and very quickly mobilized and made available by many national governments, we could have used that to incentivize the deployment of energy efficiency technologies. Instead, we squandered it on simply subsidizing the heating and the electricity bills. And I think this is a good example of how not to do it. Of course, it is an issue that with many of the, or actually the good news is that with many of the energy efficiency solutions, the payback times are very short. You can do an awful lot for limited resources, at least things that will pay itself back very quickly. But the truth is also that despite that, and that's where some economists will say, well, why doesn't it just happen then? But it, I think tons of studies have been done on sort of consumer psychology and whatever, and it just doesn't happen. So that's why we still need the stick. We need regulation to force it through. But of course, if you combine it with incentives, of course, we'll be in a much better place. And there was some missed opportunities, I feel, especially last year. On buildings, maybe just also a very quick reflection, which I also very much agree that we should not just focus on the operations of the buildings, but also on the embedded carbon in the materials. And then I would like to add a third point here, because there's a very little focus on the process of constructing the buildings. The construction sites themselves are a huge emitter of CO2, whether it's from heavy machinery or some of the processes that goes on in a construction site. So hopefully in the years to come, we will also shed light on that part of the value chain of a building. So not just the embedded carbon in the materials, but also the construction, and then of course finally the operation of the buildings. Absolutely. Now coming back to your question on Danfoss internally, and how do we work with it? Yes, we have very hard KPIs and of course a climate strategy for the company as a whole. Our operations in Denmark were actually decarbonized by the end of last year, so CO2 neutral. And then we are working towards decarbonizing all our production facilities and Danfoss facilities more generally by the end of before 2030. And I think personally, I'm surprised how fast we were able to do that through very hard KPIs and continuous improvement. So just within a span of less than 10 years, we have raised energy productivity in our production by more than 80%. Energy intensity has gone down almost 50%. Heat consumption has gone down more than 60%, and all through technologies that is more or less in-house. So again, maybe hopefully a lesson to others. Certainly we will help. We have also decided, when we look at our global operations, that we have actually selected some production facilities that are next in line for being fully decarbonized, where we hope they can become a showcase. So a country like Poland, for example, where we have massive operations, will be next in line. And that is done deliberately, because that hopefully should also have a political impact. We all know that, for example, the Polish government is not always so eager for higher standards on energy efficiency in the ongoing EU negotiations that you just mentioned, Toby. So also they are hoping to showcase that payback times are short. It can be done. It's technology that is available. So really no need for this concern or caution. Actually, it benefits everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Rasmus. Yeah, go back to your point on construction. I think, yeah, that's really interesting. We're actually in conversations trying to get a big construction company, to join EP100 at the moment. We've had some detailed discussions with them, and they're looking at their whole on-site delivery, how they actually reduce the emissions when they're building a building, which is, it's been much neglected. So I think that's really key. Two of our newer corporate campaigns at Climate Group as well, we're working on steel zero and concrete zero. So we're actually looking at how we can try and decarbonize those raw materials, because obviously I think it's about 7% and 8% of global emissions for concrete and steel. So working with the supply chain there to say, how can we decarbonize these materials that are so energy intensive to make in the first place? Can we recycle them? Can we reuse them for other uses? And the circular economy, I think it's I'm not a particular fan of that phrase, to be honest. I think it's a bit nebulous and could mean lots of different things to lots of people. But yeah, circularity, I think, is really key in the built environment, especially how can we reuse even like things like furniture within buildings. When I was doing some work with a previous organization, that was one of the biggest carbon savings for them with their office move, was just reusing their furniture instead of buying a whole bunch of new tables and chairs and all that stuff. So yeah, there's some really interesting insights coming out on reusing materials in terms of building materials, but also in-site building materials as well. Gabriela, I'm just going to go back to you as well. So on the policy side of things, how can we really ramp up the ambition of policy? So we're seeing some things hopefully go through the EU Parliament shortly on buildings, but what do you think is the major blocker for governments not adopting stricter standards for energy efficiency or for buildings?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think all of us would like to know that. But some hints. some thoughts from my side. Yeah, we talked here today about policy and incentives and having both to be ambitious and bold and targeted, but probably one of the missing pieces would be information and how people realize the opportunities around energy efficiency. And we just heard from Rasmus that nice surprises happen. And actually, well, let's try to implement some very hard and strong and ambitious KPIs. And suddenly we realize that, well, after all, this was really a nice surprise and we could actually do it. And it's not the first time I hear those type of stories. It actually happens more often than we could think of. But actually trying out, implementing, and then learning from others and from our own experiences and trying to disseminate this information. And then this would be, I would say, critical, but another one would be on the finance side. Definitely, I would like to keep on insisting on the financing issue. We should all over the world create the conditions that companies like energy service companies could actually operate and implement and produce or provide solutions like energy as a service or lighting as a service or heating as a service, these type of things, or on-bill financing by the utilities. So all sorts of a bit more innovative financing means so that people, corporates, and the public sector could actually move into more targeted action and more quick action. And we see that, I mean, in UNEP, here we work mostly in developing countries and emerging economies, and we see the barriers that there are out there whenever these type of solutions are presented from complete vacuum in legislation. So this type of energy as a service could not even happen because it's not even possible in the existing regulation and legislation in a certain place. Up to total disconnect on disregard of energy saving as an opportunity. So I would say information and financing could be also our two critical points here.
Yeah, thanks, Gabriela. Yasmin, I wonder if you want to reflect on that, just like Gabriela was saying with the financing aspect. I think that's something we want to work on at Climate Group specifically. I think it goes hand in hand with policy. So if there's stronger supporting policy that enables those finance institutions to say, we're confident we can invest in this building because, you know, there's some good policy in place for that. But do you think, what would you like to see? What would really help from kind of a building, new builds, but also a renovating buildings perspective, just on that financing aspect? How can we really unlock that financing? Because I think with all the various climate strategies needed, the funding gap for buildings is one of the biggest kind of finance gaps between what is available and what is actually required to do this, to get to net zero.
All right. I think I'm going to go back to, I think we're seeing different practices around the globe. I think in Europe, probably fairly robust systems are established, for example. Are they sufficient or not is a different question, but for example, I'll just give you an anecdote. I work in New York actually, and for some of our projects, we were trying to investigate or research what if you wanted to be really progressive, what is the funding available to us for this building projects? And even then, there's a lot of demystification needed because, you know, some of our policies like the Inflation Reduction Act is fairly new in its language. I mean, we need to break the barriers, I think, between the financing and the actual implementers. And what's interesting here in the state side, at least, most of these incentives or financing incentives, let's say, come in forms of tax benefits, which means that it's not just that we need to be a building professional, but also we need to understand, you know, tax measures, or it's almost kind of part-time accountancy too, which is quite an interesting place to be. But in addition to that, I think this is the government side, right? So the government funding comes in forms of grants, but also it comes in forms of tax incentives. But I do believe that private sector has an important role to play here. And we are seeing more and more in, for example, pension funds and others that are investing in the more ESG focused funds and activities. And I think all of this needs to be boosted, and we're seeing it grow, but I don't know if it's at the place it needs to be right now. And I think I wish there was a global organization, maybe like yourselves also, that could bring some more clarity to this globally, but also lessons learned, right?
Yeah.
And one solution might not be applicable everywhere, so we need to find local solutions that help globally, but also recognizes the local specificities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's right, Yasmin. And yeah, we really want to push more on the financing aspect of building decarbonisation. It's something we're looking to do more in the future. At Climate Week this year, in September, we're hoping to discuss more the Inflation Reduction Act, as you mentioned as well. It's a really key bit of legislation. Fatih Birol, the CEO of International Energy Agency, said it was the most significant piece of climate legislation since the Paris Accords. So, there's good causes for optimism there. But I think you're right that it needs to be as simple as possible for people to access it. And I used to work on domestic energy efficiency, and we know there, even if you're offering people free insulation or whatever it is, if they have to jump through hoops, fill in lots of forms to go about that, they're not going to do it. So you need to make it as simple as possible. And yeah, maybe not exactly the same for corporates, but yeah, a simple mechanism where people can access this funding. Thanks for that. Really useful, and yeah, it's something we want to do some more work with. We've got a few more minutes left for the Q&A, so please keep on firing those in. We probably won't get through all of them, but we can follow up afterwards. So I'm going to go to, maybe I'll start with Rasmus on this one. And, we know that lots of companies are setting net zero goals, carbon neutrality goals, which is great, but often they don't include energy efficiency element as part of that. So, technically you could buy a load of offsets and PPAs and say, hey, we're net zero, but actually they haven't done any efficiency work at all. What would you say to fellow corporates who are looking to embark on this journey? How do you ensure you get that buy-in for the energy efficiency element?
Well, I think a couple of reflections on that. Energy efficiency, of course, often would be the cheapest way to decarbonize. Again, as I have mentioned a couple of times, payback times of many of the technologies we're talking about here is very, very low or short, and therefore it makes a lot of sense. I think when we talk about renewables more generally, and I thought there was also a question on that in the chat. I think we need to also look a little bit ahead here. One thing is the situation today. But imagine in 20 years, in most industrialized countries, our electricity consumption will be 5 times what it is today, at least as a result of electrification, mainly. And it means that renewables will not necessarily remain cheap or necessarily remain available in the quantities that companies would like. So to simply place all your bets on that in your decarbonization strategy can be risky in terms of costs. And that's, of course, where the energy efficiency comes in. So going back to my original point, the way we see it is it's a bit of a hierarchy. Start with the energy efficiency. The first fuel, the greenest energy, is the one we don't use. And then secondly, maybe look at the energy that within your company or your suppliers or whatever that has already been produced, but that you're not taking advantage of. And it may sound like a trivial matter, but it is not. If you look across Europe, for example, we published a report last week showing that the potential for excess heat in Europe amounts to almost 3,000 terawatt hours per year. And that roughly equates with Europe's entire heat consumption per year. So basically, we could heat Europe just with excess heat from industry, from a number of unconventional sources like data centers, supermarkets, what have you. So going down that path as well will get you very, very far. And then, of course, that's a fair point. Then we have to green the rest through renewables and green electricity. But again, renewables, green electricity will be in scarce supply because we need it also for hydrogen, power to X, these kind of technologies that we only seeing the early emergence of. But soon they will take up a large share of our electricity consumption, and that will change the picture completely.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Rasmus. And yeah, I would like to mention that report as well. The white paper that Danfoss just published on XSC, super interesting. So I recommend everyone give that a read. And we can actually send around the link when we follow up with everyone, Rasmus. But yeah, super interesting. And yeah, we're wasting so much energy, and yeah, just capturing this waste heat it just seems like a no-brainer. So fully support that, of course. Right, we're getting to time with the Q&A. We've got lots more questions to get through, and we could speak for hours, I'm sure, but we want to get people back to their working days. So I might just go to each of you individually. If you could give a brief, I know I'm going to put you on the spot, but a quick silver bullet. What's the one thing that you would recommend, or you would wish for, to really drive increased ambition or actual action on energy efficiency and building decarbonisation? I'll start with Gabriela. Put you on the spot first.
Well, the silver bullet, that's a very hard one. I mean, the silver bullet has to be a combination of policy, of course, first top of the list, incentives and finance, and proper energy prices and information and capacity. So that would be my silver bullet. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriela. Rasmus?
Well, it's complex and it easily ends up being like a salvo of silver bullets in all directions. But if I should just choose one, I would definitely emphasize: do not mess with the price signals.
That's a good one. Thank you. And Yasmin?
I was going to approach it from something. Actually, I have two suggestions. One is very daily pragmatic. The other one is actually forward thinking. I actually think that the silver bullet is probably continue to educating our children. So we're no longer talking about these things, and it becomes so intuitive that these conversations are in vain, I'm hoping. But I think more pragmatically, maybe because of the things that I was mentioning today, of the complexities of getting to these funds, etc. I wish that every country had a single phone line, right? Like we have, for example, for pension. I can call somebody and ask a question about my pension. I cannot call somebody and ask a question about how to get the funding and how to get what are the incentives available. I'm not sure if I should be calling the Department of Energy or Department of State or Department of Tax Office. I'm not sure where to call. I mean, I'm being a bit provocative here. I think we know as building professionals where to call, but I don't expect every person to know this either. So I wish every country had a single phone line, kind of simplicity that makes all of these things more accessible to all of us.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Now, so we're both very good. We'll allow you 2 silver bullets. So thanks for that, Yasmin. Great. Thank you, everyone, for that discussion. Really enjoyed it. We'll try and follow up with some further questions after the event as well. So thanks to the audience for sending in your questions. Some really good stuff there. And I'm sure we could spend a lot longer discussing them, but we'll leave people wanting more, which is always a good way. So yeah, really appreciate it to all the panelists here. We're just going to go on to the next section now. So if I could ask you to put your cameras off, that'd be super. And I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Emily, who's going to take us through some of the latest findings from the last EP100 report. So over to you, Emily.
Thank you. So as Toby mentioned, our report was released last week. We've entitled this report as Climate Critical, the Energy Efficiency Imperative. And this report really dives into the importance of energy efficiency measures across corporate climate strategies and the progress it can make to reach net zero. So we collect data from our members on reporting on their energy consumption, their emissions, and their financial savings. And we can see on this screen some of our key findings. So we're really happy to see that our figures have improved from last year as a collective membership. So some of these key findings Gabriela did mention. We can see that our members have saved on reduced emissions by 380 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent to date. And in the last year alone, they've reduced emissions by 39.5 million metric tons. And this is actually the equivalent of powering electricity to 7.6 million homes. We can also take a look at our energy savings. So they have saved a collective 1,085 terawatt hours of energy to date. And that is more than the annual electricity consumption of Canada and Brazil combined. Finally, we're taking a look at cost savings and financial savings. And you can see that our members have combined savings of $1.2 billion since implementing energy efficiency measures. And in the last year, that is $140 million. From these statistics, we can see that investing in energy efficiency is a practical step to reduce emissions and your energy consumption, as well as saving you money. So on average, 81% of our members are actually ahead of schedule to reach their EP100 target before their target year. And this just shows the great progress that is being made in energy efficiency by our members and how it makes a difference to how they operate. In 2022, we had 3 members meet their EP100 target: Danfoss, JSW Cement, and Mahindra Heavy Engines. Finally, we'd like to thank all of our members for continuing to report to us annually on their energy productivity and lead the way on transparent and ambitious climate action. We'd also like to thank the members on the screen for agreeing to be profiled in the report or providing a quote and share their stories with us. And this just really highlights the action underway and helps inspire other companies to follow their lead. Finally, thanks also go to Carbon Trust for their technical and analytical support in sense checking the data, and our partner, the World Green Building Council. If you have any questions about the report, please email us directly. You can also find it on our website, and in the chat function, there is a link that will take you there. If you'd like to get involved and join our membership, please do, and we would love to see your data contributing to these energy savings. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Emily. Yeah, we highly recommend you go to the website and download the latest reports. Some really interesting stuff on it, and congrats to Emily for all her hard work on it. You know, it's a great bit of work, so recommend you downloading that. We put it in the chat as well. Cool. So to wrap things up, we're doing all right for time actually. So we're going to actually do a final poll and get some opinions off yourselves. So Emily will just launch the poll now. If you could pick your choice there. Yeah, we really appreciate everyone joining the discussions today. Want to thank my panelists, Yasmin from SOM, Rasmus from Danfoss, and Gabriela from the UNEP Copenhagen Climate Change Centre. Really interesting discussions. Really appreciate your time and your efforts in being involved in this. Just in terms of follow-ups, we'll send around the recording of the event so you can send to any colleagues. We'll also send around some of the key findings and some of the report that Rasmus mentioned as well on waste heat from Danfoss, which is really interesting. Please do send in any feedback you might have from the event as well. We're really keen to work with all of our members and other stakeholders on energy efficiency, raising the profile. Like we've said, we still need to keep banging the drum for energy efficiency, and that's what we're here to do at Climate Group and with the EP100. So it's been a pleasure speaking to you today. Okay, we'll give you a couple more seconds to do that poll, but yeah, okay. Cool, so the results are in. I think we have a tie. So we basically asked you, what is the major barrier within your organization to reach your energy efficiency targets? And we've got top 2 actually of unpredictable funding, which we've discussed quite a lot. And then we've got other as well, so we can dig down into that and another time if you want to feedback on what some of those other reasons were. Some of the other top answers are a lack of technical knowledge and process within the within the organization. So we do hear that from quite a few of our members as well. There may be a sort of willing to do it within the organization, but there might be a lack of data, lack of knowledge in-house. So that's one of the key barriers as well. But yeah, we'll wrap it up there. Yeah, once again, just like to thank everyone for joining today. We'll send around the recording and we'll leave it there as we're bang on time. So thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of your day and we'll see you soon. Thank you.